Welcome to the Didi and Lital Show. Advice, thoughts, and stories from a married couple on cybersecurity, technology, and life in general. Now here are your hosts, Didi and Lital.
Hello and welcome to the Didi and Lital. I'm Lital. Hello, Didi. That's another week.
Another
How
week.
things are going?
Things are awesome. We are both in the springy shirts. I have the sharks. You have the
Flowers.
the flowers.
Weather is awesome.
Weather is awesome. Bruins still lost. We just got out of Shiva. Everything is awesome.
Yeah. Summer is upon us. And we have a guest today.
Yes, we have a guest.
Welcome, Daniel.
Welcome, Daniel.
Hello. And since we coordinated shirts, I brought my lucky, security sweater.
Okay.
Okay.
What does it say? The lucky security sweater, or it doesn't say?
anything. It's
Oh.
a blank canvas. 'Cause
Black
I
canvas.
list-
Like everything in security.
Yes.
Black canvas. Daniel, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Absolutely. So I'm a partner in a fund called Cervin Ventures. We're an early stage fund. We do enterprise investments in seed and A rounds. We back technical founders, and we typically focus on things that we have a little bit of a bias towards infrastructure, and that kind of presents itself towards cybersecurity, data, cloud management, DevOps. We also do applications, but everything that we do is related to enterprise, B2B and B2D. We lead rounds. We're investing out of Fund 5 for us. So we've been around for about 10 years. And all of my partners have been operators and started companies in the enterprise space. And I'm the only one who's disguised as an operator. But my background is I've spent 8.5 years at Cisco. That's where I met Didi. I've done primarily investments in corporate development, M&A, for the team. Initially, I was covering Israel because I'm originally from Israel, but then after a few years, I started covering Latin America as well. And then I moved back to the US, and I'm based in the Bay. And I started to focus on clouds, data centers, and networking. So they got me in the last 1.5 years. I started covering networking as well. And before that, I was based in Seattle. I was in Microsoft in the Azure team, and I was a VC before that, and a mediocre chip design engineer for about 4 or 5 years before that. Just like many other Israelis, I'm an 8200 grad. Basically, I was on the intelligence side in 8200, and I'm an EE major, and that's where I met my wife, who is the best engineer in our household, and got 3 daughters. So I would, no expectations or anything, but I would expect to be the 5th best engineer by the time that they grow up.
Amazing. Yes.
Cool.
So, you're the first investor actually on a show, and we are in really interesting times, when you've been in investment now for a decade, so you've seen the ups and downs and turns around and things like, how do you explain the market right now? And how do you see it? What's ahead of us? I think all of us wish we had a crystal ball, but give a little bit of sense of where we're at. We have a lot of people in apps listening to us.
Yep.
And people that want to start a startup. So, and all of them are asking, is it the right time to be in a startup? How should people think about it?
Yeah, I'm going to take the last part first. The answer is always yes for investment. It's easy. Just go and build, and not deal with the repercussions of those decisions that are kind of like life altering. But to your question, it's interesting. So I've been in the industry for about a little bit over 10 years, and I think in the first 10 or the first 9, I've experienced 3 cycles, which is basically the 2009 to 2011. And 2011 till 2015, 16, and then the hyper growth or the initial growth between 2017 and 2019, and then at Cervin, which is my last 18 months, I've experienced 3 waves, which is basically the end of the boom in the capital markets towards the end of 2021 and early 2022, the adjustment period that came out of that in mid 22 until late 22, and then the boom of AI and Gen AI and in particular ChatGPT and all of the proxies and residuals of that. And so in a sense, you've got 3 different periods in 18 months that I've experienced financial VC. And I was a strategic one before. But to your question, it's hard to tell where the markets, are headed at. We feel like there's a little bit of a parallel universe taking place specifically right now, in a sense that you've got the Gen AI ecosystem, you've got everything else, and that is becoming as overhyped as the 21, 22 era. And the other side of the market, is where, companies are kind of facing the reality of, hey, it's a stiffer market. It's harder to sell. You have to think about, strategic moves and how do you adjust quickly to the customer needs. And, you have to stress test your thesis around, does my product make sense or not? So your question, maybe to go back to the question, yes, it's an absolutely interesting and fascinating time to start a company, but you have to be very, very careful and deliberate about where you started and why do you think you can win, and just stress test that thesis as you move forward.
It's really interesting because walking down the show floor at RSA conference a few weeks ago, and you could see a lot of companies just put something about generative AI, putting GPT. I guess part of it is not because of a market demand, but rather catering for the investor money that is out there and looking at, maybe if we add this to our messaging, we will be able to raise it might have been easier for us to raise the next round of funding, which I think where many of us startups these days are. Many of us are towards the end of the runway, trying to elongate the runway, and it's tough. We all want to raise funds. Some are in better shape, some are, and I guess the realization that the money is there if you have AI somewhere.
Yep. You're the person that killed the AI on your company's AI.
I killed the AI on the domain name.
Yes.
We are .security now.
Yes.
So I'm kind of against the trend. We're not raising on an AI trend.
Gen AI.
Yes.
That, .Gen AI.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you're saying there is 2 parallels, the kind of non-Gen AI and everything else that they can raise on a hype cycle right now.
And look, I think the intricacies and the hidden secret, in this universe is, when you think about the ecosystem of investors, right? All of the investors, we all have our bosses, right?
Yeah.
Investors kind of take somewhat of a maybe paternal approach to patriarch approach maybe to their companies. We all report to our LPs. We all have to think about the next fundraise. The fundraising cycles have changed, right? And so you have to think about the dry powder that you have in your fund, and then make adjustments and invest based on that. And so the initial adjustment that was made in the market was, let's take care of our portfolio, make sure that portfolio has suffice money to continue. We'll see where this crisis ends, right? If it's a 3 to 4 year cycle, we're all going to be in trouble, right? Mm-hmm. But that's kind of one side of let's take care of our portfolio, and then let's think about the next wave of companies that we can invest in. Everybody was on the fence and kind of waiting for about 6, 7, 8 months. But you're also paid to make investments, and once people have seen the seeds of potentially transformational shift in the infrastructure that we use and the way that we interact with technology, you know, everybody is trying to make bets, and it's a little bit of a gold rush, right, into that space. And so you have that shiny object that everybody's chasing after, and people are still making some silly decisions. I don't know if you've seen like the article or rewrite. They got 170 term sheets. That's ridiculous.
Ridiculous. There is no single investment company that didn't offer to chip in. Yeah.
And so, to me, that means that you have to be very, very careful. And we've always been kind of preaching the disciplined entrepreneurship mantra. When we did it 10 years ago, everybody was brushing it off because nobody else was telling it. And now that we're talking about it, like everybody's brushing us off because everybody's talking about it. So we should have probably trademarked or coined like that disciplined entrepreneur hashtag. But look, it's there is an opportunity, right? In a sense that if you're interacting with technology differently, and it feels like there's a good sliver of chance that we will. You have to think through some of the investments that you've already made in the application layer, for example, right? Some of the things that made sense pre-Gen AI make less sense now, and you have to think about the underlying infrastructure. And I can tell you this, like my partners and I, we're combing the land for the right security for Gen AI, bets. But I can tell you that, and Didi, you're the first to tell me this. Security always follows the infrastructure, and it's always a proxy.
Yeah, we'll come afterwards. We talk a lot about it, how those things, the transformation happens first, then security follows.
And
unfortunately.
And also there's another interesting thing. So when you look at Gen AI, we can give the example of our son. So our youngest son, Omri, is a greedy bastard. He would do anything for money.
He's 13 and he wants to be rich.
Yes.
That's his dream.
But exactly. No, he doesn't care how.
That's how you really feel.
Yes. And so he asked ChatGPT, what can a 13-year-old do to make real money? And ChatGPT basically told him, build your blog, and on the blog, base that, put like Amazon.
Referral links to Amazon and different products. It gave him some valid ideas for what a 13-year-old do.
No, it's like talking to a middle-aged man that doesn't know technology. And a lot of the conversation that I'm seeing with people having with ChatGPT, it's like talking to your dumber uncle. And
your dumber uncle will tell him to put links to Amazon?
Just ask his dumb uncle. Trust me, he'll tell him to do his dumb uncle will tell him to do some harebrained marketing scheme. Never.
No, he will tell him to have a pizza shop.
He'll tell him to have a pizza shop.
That's what your brother has. A U-Haul.
A U-Haul. So to the point, one of my challenges right now with ChatGPT is that it looks really cool, but when you dive back into the content, you see that it's basically a dumber version of a person. And in the security part of the world, unfortunately, you need to be on the smarter version of the person, because there's always the hackers are on the smarter side. And if you put your dumber uncle to deal with the smarter hackers, this is going to be a fun experience to see once these products come out.
It's going to be super fun because like companies are. They are, right? The question is like how security aware, how compliance aware, how risk averse they are in terms of like, just betting on these interfaces, right?
Yes.
Implementing them.
And then, you're only as strong as your weakest link, and your weakest link, like people wise, your crazy uncle, right? That you meet at a party and may have drunk too much, and so that's how the interface that you're going to have to protect. So, I mean, look at ransomware, right? Like it's not rocket science, but still,
just works.
It's still a huge attack vector, right?
The Didi and Lital show will return in a moment. The Didi and Lital show is sponsored by Ort. In today's world, identities are the perimeter protecting the organization and are the most exploited vector by attackers. if your security teams are struggling to maintain control of identity management tools, Ort can help. Ort offers a centralized platform for discovering, monitoring, assessing, and remediating identity threats to your business. While most security platforms can take weeks or months to start identifying and remediating risks, with Ort, your security teams can get started in as little as 30 minutes and start securing the identity perimeter immediately. Ort will surface the most critical vulnerabilities and give your security teams the recommended action steps. Start your trial today at ort.io. That's OORT.io. The Didi and Lital Show is sponsored by Hunters. Hunters is a SaaS platform purpose-built for security operation teams, providing unlimited data ingestion and normalization at a predictable cost. Hunters helps SOC teams mitigate real threats faster and more reliably than SIM. Visit hunters.ai to learn more.
Yeah, but actually the thing that is on the rise, this is where I toot my horn about, I told you so. The identity attacks are just going, like, especially now with the ChatGPT stuff, it's so easy to phish. It's so easy to even pretend to be calling the command center. The ChatGPT can even help you kind of call a support center and say, what are the things to do to get your MFA reset in this company?
Well, you can make deep fake of your voice, really easy to do. So, your voice signature is no longer valid. So a lot of technologies are very fast becoming obsolete with that, because voice is no longer an identification of you and not a chat bot. Just taking a sample of your voice.
Which is something that I do want to complain to every support center out there. If the fraudsters can do this, can I have somebody that I can understand coherently that speaks to me? I was calling Sears and I couldn't understand anything.
That's a good idea.
Yes.
Of just
call center with smart AI that can have somebody that you understand.
Clean your voice, clean your accent.
Exactly. Especially
they can
ours.
Clean my accent if you don't like it.
Especially,
maybe you'll put a filter on our podcast.
I will make the
next.
Zohan. I will do the Zohan. It's the best accent ever. It's the best accent ever.
Israeli accent.
Yes.
So thinking about what's next in cybersecurity. So we talked about Gen AI. Are there other things that you're excited to invest in, things you think are growing? We've been to the recent conferences. What's new? What's out there?
I think it's interesting. I think like the big waves that we had in the last few years are kind of like known, right? There's the cloud wave that still continues to persist, and it feels like we're in Gen 3, maybe 4 of that transformation. And so that's a good example of like security actually followed like the platform, right? I mean, CSPM has been around forever, and now it's huge, right? It's overtaking. The other one is everybody has had a way. I think we track about 30 companies in the cohort of supply chain security, and that's a big attack, obviously. And it's growing, but we really like that space, but we haven't made a bet in the space except for a company called Armor Code, which is actually somewhat in the outskirts of that space, but it was going into that space about over time years. Just because when you think about AppSec, like if you want to dominate AppSec, you'll have to do something. And so that's a big one that that we've been tracking in the last year and a half or two. And then the other one that we're spending a lot of cycles in, and Didi, you're gonna love this one.
Okay, I love this.
It's identity, but if you think about identity, it's just a huge and growing CAGR, right? There are very well established incumbents in the space. That being said, it feels like there could be very interesting entry points into the market. So. Interestingly enough, like, the biggest vendors or the biggest incumbents in the space are one, company that's not essentially a security, it's a platform company, Microsoft, right? And the other and the third one is Thoma Bravo.
Yep. So, that went off and often bought everybody. They bought Ping, they bought SailPoint. Who else did they buy?
They bought SailPoint Ping.
Oh, Beyond Trust.
Yeah.
Beyond
And
Trust.
yeah. Let me see if I no ForgeRock.
Yeah. Yep. By the way, you're forgetting a big identity company that we cannot not mention.
Yes.
Yes,
Cisco?
Cisco.
Cool.
Cisco, platform company that also does identity.
Yeah.
And this is credit. This is I was telling Lital this. Daniel knows this. The security business unit in Cisco is bigger than most big established security companies. People don't
Oh,
realize how huge it is.
I mean, between Cisco and Microsoft, you kind of like have bigger than most of the startup ecosystem. Yeah,
Yep.
for sure.
Yep, exactly.
So
it's over
that leads,
4 billion in ARR.
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
So
Mind-boggling.
we have these conversations of like, what's the point in building a company and thinking, what's the chances of a cybersecurity company, going IPO these days versus being bought by the big platform players? And I don't know what customer wants these days. Like, we are preaching them a best of breed by, yes, go with the big guys, but also augment yourself with some, innovative products. Is that still what you see from customers? Are they willing to buy best of breed, buy point solutions from smaller startups versus let's get the E5 blanket agreement with Microsoft and don't think about it at all?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's a great question. And to me, they're kind of, it depends on the customer, and it depends, like there's literally a very dynamic, a very interesting dynamic between stakeholders within the customers, right? If you think about like the CISO team, think about the practitioners, they're still preaching for like the best of breed, but if you think about like, the finance side, if you think about like, the CEO conversations, the board conversations, right? You have to cut spend. And so, a company like Palo comes in and says like, we've got 7, like, products. They say they are best of breed, but let's give them like, let's say that they're 80 or 90%, there in terms of like best of breed in each category. And you get that for, a discount through an enterprise contract, right? So that's a big push, not just from Palo, right, but also like from the management team that says, when does it end, right? Like, are we going to continue to increase our security budget, like even when our business is no longer like growing as it was before? So it really depends on the customer size, like the different stakeholders. But to your question, I think companies should be realistic about like the potential outcome that they'll have. Everybody wants to IPO, everybody wants to go, and go all out, right? But to me, right now, like this is a time for pragmatism, right? You take what the market gives you. If you have like best of breed entry into the market, and you think that that's a big pain point, that there's a subset of customers that are willing to pay for it, yes, absolutely, go for that, and then play it over time. I think like a good example for me is if you think about like a Netscope, right? It started off as something that's completely different from where it's at right now, and they
Yeah.
had to make the adjustment. I personally thought, like, when there was consolidation in CASB, like, where would Netscope like end up going, right? And they had struggles, and now they've raised like more depth, right? I don't know when they'll IPO, but like they are at least a size where it may be doable, right? And so you have to make those adjustments and take what the market gives you right now.
Yeah, I was shocked they were the last Casby to stay there as an independent company and not when other Lum got bought, other
CloudLock.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing. I feel like it happened in the SOAR market too, and now we see SOAR 2.0, right? All the SOAR players were bought by the Sims. There was the Misto, Phantom, all of them got bought. And now you get a new round when you have Tynes and Talk and kind of like next gen. And there's the question, like, do people want to buy a separate orchestration tool versus get the whole thing as one big SIM plus orchestration. I'm in this market, so I know I tend to talk a lot about that. Really interesting dynamic. I think we'll see a lot of consolidations.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a consolidation in the market for sure. I think only yesterday it was published. There are rumors, right, that Laminar is going to get acquired, so we don't know for certain, obviously. Papers. But like that's another cohort of like 25 companies, right? Some of them raised like at least 5 of them raised like more than 50 million each. And if the first vendor, the leader, one of the leaders gets acquired for 250 allegedly, I guess that's what's advertised. That kind of like puts the others in a very, I guess, interesting position. You're gonna see some pretty damning stories, pretty bad stories in the sense that there's that musical chair game is just very tough. You have 25. How many of them are going to get acquired? Acquisitions are tough. Like finding the right asset, like right cultural fit, right price, so like putting that product into your machine is just tough. So how many of those are actually going to happen? Like how many of those are going to be just going to be fire sales, and some may not be even fire sales, right? So it's gonna be interesting. There is gonna be consolidation, but
Do you think?
I think
Do you think VCs need to be more realistic about the 5x magic number, and especially if they want to recover some of their investments? Or
I think VCs are a lot more pragmatic than you think. I think like in a sense, there's a little bit.
I think they're very pragmatic. Trust me, I have a very enlightened version of this, thanks to our buddy Sean.
No, you guys have wonderful investors, by the way.
Yes.
Both companies, both Hunters and obviously Ort. Friends with Greg and Sean and the Wild Crew and Cisco. So VCs are very pragmatic. There's a little bit of an overshoot towards like one direction versus the other. But look, I think the nature, the human nature is optimistic, right?
Yep.
And to some degree, that gets exacerbated, maybe amplified. When you're an entrepreneur, when you're a founder of a company, it's your baby, and and you think about the outcome that you want for that baby. So some of like the entrepreneurs are easier to convince than others. I think like some will hit the wall and try to run through it. Some will hit the wall and may not be able to run through it, and some will just decide, okay, then we'll do this for the next few years. This is a good home for us, and we'll go on to the next thing, or maybe we become executives and the CEO of the acquiring company. That happens too.
Yep. Speaking of Cisco, if I remember correctly, Tom came from Ironport.
Yeah, and like if you remember, like Ulovich, like
yes,
open DNS and headed security practice as well. So
yep.
I mean, for the big companies, the talent game, I think, is one of the reasons to acquire. It's not just the technology. You acquire, at least for a couple of years, you acquire good talent, and sometimes that's game changer for them.
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that like there's and I don't think a lot of people like talk about this enough, but it's interesting. When you acquire a company, like you can only take care of like the execs, the key people, for maybe 3 or maybe 4 years, like at best. After that, like they become part of the company, and yet like those are brilliant founders, right? And they're used to a certain set of like compensation that you can no longer like I mean, you just have to start adjust to like everybody else in the company. So what do you do with that talent, right? But like if that talent is all in and is committed for the next 3 to 4 years, it's probably leaps and bounds above what you have in your group. So if you think about like a Didi, like Mohit in Thousand Eyes, like grown his business, but he's taken on like a lot more like a lot more, R&R and, leadership across like, areas that are beyond like his business.
Yep.
And, that's a great outcome. You want that to happen. You buy a company, partially because of the DNA and not just because of the tech, but also because, they did something right.
Yep.
And you want, a piece of that, that spark to rub in on, so like, your company. So that makes total sense.
Thank you.
Cool.
I think we're running towards the end.
We have
so
a little game to
we have the
play.
game to play. So
Let's go for it.
Producer Dave, let's go for our game.
Coming up.
And now Lital and Didi present Prove You're Not a Robot. 3 final authenticating questions for our guest.
So, Daniel, if you were a cybersecurity superhero, what would be your name and who would play you in the Hollywood movie to follow?
Yeah, that would probably be the equivalent of Aquaman.
Yeah.
I hate to say Aquasec because there's already company.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
Yep.
there is Aquasec.
Yes. Amir Jerby and I know each other for almost 30 years.
Great company.
But probably the equivalent of Aquaman is security world.
Yes. And who would be the actor?
Probably a combination of Jason Momoa and Paul Rudd, because you want to have the comedic element, but also you want to be, a superhero, right? And I think that's the actor who creates superhero best. So
Nice. What's your favorite waste of time on the internet?
Oh, I love listening to podcasts. My 2 favorite ones right now are Fly on the Wall and Smartless, and both are comedic in nature, and it's just wonderful experiences related to either SNL and or just actors that are super funny and enter really funny situations. So it just clears my mind to hear those stories.
Nice.
I'm gonna check Smartless.
Well,
after the show.
yes. Well, Lital is a big podcast fan. We have our own favorite at home, which is No Stupid Questions. I have a thing for Angela Duckworth. Hopefully she'll listen to our podcast. And
We love Angela Duckworth.
Yes.
And the Freakonomics in
Yes.
general.
Yep.
It's a good one.
Next, yes.
And last but not least, what was your first computer?
Oh, wow. My God. I can't say I remember, but it was in the 90s. I remember really well. Can't say like which one it was, but I remember like the celebratory nature of like receiving a computer. And it's funny, like we had a computer in our basement. It was always like, that was the setup for like literally my parents still live in that house and that setup is still there. But it became like this shrine. Like we all went and played games, basically Prince of Arabian and all these like games when we were growing up, right after school.
Yeah.
But I remember like what I remember the best, and it's not the computer itself, but it's the experience of like walking down the stairs or running down the stairs to the computer. And the other thing that I remember, like it's like it was my brother already there, and he already like he's already set up shop there and duking it out with him. But yeah, it's just it just changed everything. Come to think of it.
Cool.
Daniel,
thank you very much for coming.
It was
Lital,
a pleasure having
take us
you with
home.
us. Thank you so much. So
Thanks for
this
having me.
was the Didi and Lital show. Thanks for joining us. We're here weekly. Please rate and review us wherever you get your podcast. Until the next time, have a great one. See
Take care.
you. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Didi.
Thank you.